All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the sequel to Venom, starring Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock with the alien symbiote that talks and does farty, poopy butt dick humor and loves eating people's heads. It's, people like this character ever since the comics, and I think people waited a long time for this movie to happen, the original one, and it actually was a kind of a surprise success. I mean, with Marvel, it's never really a surprise. You kind of just assume these things are always going to be successful, but I don't think people expected it to do as well as it did, and then a sequel was greenlit. And it got delayed with the pandemic, but here we are. It's out now. It's actually been out for like a month already. I'm a little late getting to this episode, but when the opportunity arose to speak about this movie, I was like, yeah, I wanted to do an episode on it, even though I never got to it. So you know what? Let's do it. And joining me is Petros from the Caged In podcast. A podcast that was all about Nicolas Cage and has now moved on to all things Coppola, the entire Coppola family, which happens to be a very, very spread out tree of connections. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to the Coppola family, but you should check out that podcast to hear more about that. But I was very happy to have Petros here on Piecing It Together to talk puzzle pieces for Venom, Let There Be Carnage. So that is coming up here in a second. Before we get to the conversation, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You could, of course, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on Pocket Casts, Spotify, all the major podcast apps. We're there, I think. If we're not there, you should let me know, and I'll make sure to get there. And that way you can hit that subscribe button. You can rate and review us over on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser or Good Pods. And, follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. Join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. And don't forget, we have a Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where you might be hearing this right now if you're one of our awesome subscribers, because I am posting this before it hits the main feed over on the Patreon. But yeah, you might be hearing this now, or you might be hearing one of our other episodes. I don't know how you'd be hearing one of our other episodes while I'm doing the spiel. Well, you're not hearing it during one of the other episodes. But anyway, you might be a subscriber, and if you are, I thank you. But there's lots of great content from Piecing It Together, from Awesome Movie Year, which is another movie podcast that I produce, and from my music career. So lots of content over there on the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, so check that out. And without any further ado, let's talk about Venom, Let There Be Carnage. All right, so we are going to talk about Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And joining me today is Petros from Caged In. How is it going, Petros?
It's going very well. I'm currently fresh off a second watch of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And not only, we're talking about a film that is exclusively in cinemas here in the UK. As I think it is in the US, right? And
yeah.
So I've now seen it in IMAX and 4DX, which, like, for people listening are not familiar with what 4DX is, it is basically like a theme park ride transposed into the cinema setting. So if there is wind, there is wind in the screen. If there is rain, there is rain in the screen. And if there is the slightest movement, you are thrown about like a fucking crash test dummy. So, like, I genuinely walked out of this screening today feeling like, can I make a compensation claim against the cinema for whiplash? Like, especially when you get into like the third act of this film, and like even anytime Venom spoke, there's like this rumbling in the back of your seat.
Oh yeah, there's so much bass in his voice.
Yeah. So they just like rumble it, and like they kind of like put these like almost not quite as strong as those like massage chairs, but like that kind of like that effect of these kind of like, I don't know what they would be, like these pressure pads that kind of press into your back, or like wind effects when bullets fly past your head. So like my mind is spinning from experiencing Venom twice in arguably the best picture in IMAX, and then the gimmicky 4DX experience.
That reminds me of when I got vaccinated earlier this year, and my first time back to the theater was for Godzilla versus Kong, which I loved. It's just so ridiculous and so over the top. And I was like, okay, I've now broken the seal. I went back to the theater after 15, 16 months or whatever. 2 days later, I was back to go watch it again in 4DX. I was like, I have to see this stupid ass movie in 4DX because I knew it would be a blast. And it was. It's a total freaking roller coaster ride. But I'm especially glad that you saw this movie twice this week because I watched this movie at a press screening a couple weeks before it even came out in the United States. So we're talking like a month ago already at this point. So you might have to fill in a couple blanks for me along the way. We'll see what happens. I watched a couple of refresher videos on YouTube to kind of get caught back up to speed here. But before we start getting into Venom too much, it is your first time on the show. Why don't you tell people a little bit about you and your podcast and what you do?
Okay, so yeah, I host Caged In, which started off its life as a Nicolas Cage retrospective podcast from the perspective of like somebody who was a Nicolas Cage agnostic, kind of like it's got this meta narrative of me kind of like being on the fence, and over time I've come like an ardent Nicolas Cage fan and supporter, and kind of possibly like the films I shouldn't do way more than I should. So like I'm a big like Stolen apologist, and like think it's like a spiritual sequel to, is it Stolen? Yeah. It's like a spiritual sequel to both Die Hard with a Vengeance and Con Air, like reteaming Nicolas Cage and Simon West behind the director's chair. But it is now morphed like Venom. I've got a symbiotic parasite inside of me, which is the Coppola family. So looking at the wider family that Nicolas Cage comes from to determine the question, are they the greatest film family of all time? And kind of like seeing where all these weird tendrils go. So whether it is the big man himself, Francis, or Eleanor Coppola, who's like recently directed a film in the last few years, or even like people you don't even know, like you couldn't go like, oh, they're a Coppola, or there's the Schwartzman family, so that kind of side of it, or people who were married in for select time, so Patricia Arquette, but only from 96 to 2002 when she was married to Nicolas Cage, or Spike Jonze for that brief window he was married to Sofia Coppola. So yeah, it's kind of spiraling, and like that sounds like I'm already got enough on my plate. It's like it's so soon to be released. I'll be starting a kind of Patreon exclusive podcast, which will kind of act as the sequel, as it were, to Coppola Connections, which will be Movie Brat Bros, where I look at all the films of like Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, all of that kind of clique that Francis Ford Coppola used to hang around with, like back in the 70s, and look at it through the lens of how did their careers match up to Francis Ford Coppola's at that time. And like, I don't know, like say it's like 1974, it's like, did anyone make a better film than The Conversation and The Godfather in that year, or whatever? Or it's like, I guess a lot of them would trounce Coppola when it comes to the 80s, because kind of after Apocalypse Now, to a lot of people, took a nosedive.
I like that you're finding these different angles to enter into film with, and then they're all things that branch out so far.
Yeah,
there's like so many directions you can go with it.
Yeah, there's like one area in the whole kind of Coppola family and involvement that they've had in film that like is an absolute no-go for me, which is like much to like my dismay, and I guess to a lot of people's, because it's like you obviously look at people in the people they surround themselves with, or who they put their faith in, and like Francis Ford Coppola has produced several Victor Salvo films, and it's like the real, like, do you know what I mean, skid mark on his career, really. Like it's like
you can't skip it though.
He made Jack, but he also produced Jeepers Creepers, like a film made by a known paedophile. Like, it's so sorry to go so heavy in the early stages, but yeah, it's There's I don't know whether to cover that one. To be confirmed on that.
Yeah, I guess you'll cross that bridge when you get to it. But yeah, I don't know. With this movie that we're going to talk about today, Venom, Let There Be Carnage, I should ask, like, leading up to this, were you a fan of the first one? Were you looking forward to the sequel?
So I realised as I sat down to watch the sequel that I didn't remember a single thing about the first one.
Yeah, that's like, pretty fair.
Because I remember watching it on, I think I was on like sick leave from work because I had an operation, and I just kind of went on these like mad like movie binges. But I remember like one day I started off the day watching The Holy Mountain, and then just had an urge to watch all of the like Chucky sequels I'd never seen. So like kind of started at Seed all the way up to, is it like Cult of Chucky? And then in that kind of milieu of being off my tits on codeine for most of it, so just like high as a kite, I watched Venom, and I remember having fun with it. I remember thinking like, it's kind of refreshing to have something that's not a part of this massive like MCU where you have to see, like, even if it's not like a direct sequel to something, it feels like sometimes with the MCU you've got to watch all these other installments. Do you know what I mean? It feels like you're dropped into like a soap opera like midway through, and like, so who's that? Why are they here? Why is it relevant that like this guy has turned up for a minute and everyone else in the cinema is going, ooh, and I'm there going like, who is that? Like, yeah, so, but like,
I don't know who that is, and I don't want to know who that is. I just want to have fun at the movies.
Exactly.
Right?
Whereas with like Venom, like, yeah, I remember it being fun, but then I think I heard word pretty early on with the sequel that is like, it almost doesn't matter if you had seen the first one, and that's very much how I feel. It's like it feels like a contained story that doesn't need a lot of like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like it carries on so much from the first one, and it doesn't feel like it leads to anywhere. Do you know what I mean? Or yeah, like directly, that it's like you have to see this one to see whatever sequel or wherever it tangentially goes in the future.
Yeah, until that post-credit scene, but I'm sure we'll get into that at some point somewhere in this conversation. But why don't we start jumping into some puzzle pieces here, and we'll get into a lot more about the movie and what we liked and didn't like along the way. But what do you have for your first puzzle piece?
So I'm gonna go in with a off the wall choice here and go with A Marriage Story.
Okay.
And for me, that is like the relationship you have between Eddie Brock and Anne, and this kind of like them trying to find this semblance of normalcy whilst kind of both caring for this, like in this case, like this symbiotic son that they weirdly both care for in this film.
Sure.
And them kind of like, yeah, juggling how to get like a normal relationship out of that and kind of be amicable, be friends. And almost like by the end of it, when you get that scene moment like where Eddie Brock says to Anne as they're like walking away from the cathedral, like, you take care of yourself, and like Venom pops out and he's like, you too, Dr. Dave. And it's like it feels like that moment at the end of A Marriage Story when like Adam Driver's character like has come to the house for like, I think it's like Halloween party, or like they're going to a Halloween party, and Scarlett Johansson's moved on and she's got like a partner, and it's amicable and it's sweet. And like, I think this film at the heart of it is a relationship story, whether it is about the relationship of Eddie Brock and Venom, or Eddie Brock and Anne, or just, yeah, all these like, and obviously the villains, like relationships seem to be at the core of this. So like, yeah, it feels like a weird puzzle piece, but like there's something about it that went, A Marriage Story, but with symbiotic aliens and a serial killer who wants to just get his sweetheart back and destroy the fucking world. Like, yeah, that sounds about right to me.
Yeah, I mean, this movie is all about the relationships between these people for sure. And I mean, it's such a weird blending of styles. And I I wish it worked more because it is like a refreshing take, like you said earlier, about how it doesn't have to set up with the other, installments of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all that, and you get to just kind of enjoy it on its own terms of what it is. And the fact that they take this big, giant, over-the-top CGI mess of a superhero movie and make it about his relationship with his ex, with his relationship with Venom itself, and just all those relationships is what makes the movie. And so, yeah, I mean, I do wish that I liked it more, but I think that's a great puzzle piece to kick it off with. And I'm just going to kind of piggyback right on top of that and go with The Odd Couple as another puzzle piece, which goes right along with that same idea of just these people are just, on each other constantly. And it could go back to the original, the sitcom or the movies or any of the many things that are inspired by, the classic Odd Couple setup. But in this one, I think that they recognize that that's kind of what people connected with the most with the first Venom movie, is the two of them kind of going at each other, especially Eddie Brock and Venom, but also the romantic relationship with Michelle Williams' character. So they took that and just really ran with it here.
Well, one of the things I really loved about this is obviously like it feels like it's made by committee, but in the best possible way. Like it's kind of like the film has been crowdsourced in like they've actually listened to the fans for like the right things of going like and like it's beautiful that it's 90 minutes. It's not like we're living in an age of overblown 2 hour 20 like blockbuster films. It's like to strip it back to 90 minutes and also like I don't know, really like focus on things that work, whether it's like even like I don't know if it's weird fan service or like it could be looked at pandering, but like I think like the first Venom, there was a lot of talk in like the LGBTQ plus community of like Venom being like this queer hero of like, do you know what I mean? Like this acceptance of self and acceptance of this side of you and like kind of letting that out. And they pay like massive lip service to that with this like great scene of like Venom kind of, and he says it, he's like, I'm out of the Eddie Brock closet, as he kind of like parades his way through this like underground San Francisco, like I don't know, like kind of he says I'm around freaks and I love it, and it's like it's like finding his people, and it's like I love that aspect of it, and I feel like this isn't a puzzle piece of mine, but you saying like The Odd Couple, it kind of has that. The plot of the film very much plays with like stuff, whether it's like Step Brothers and stuff like that, where it has that kind of like they're getting on at the beginning and then they drift apart and then it's like they must come back together at the end to kind of overcome. Whereas this is a big battle in a cathedral that it's to fucking shred it at the Catalina wine mixer. Do you know what I mean? It's like it very, and that again is like that Odd Couple thing, and it's like. I've never seen The Odd Couple itself to pull that as a puzzle piece, but like I just kind of wrote down Odd Couple comedies, that kind of like and that whole like kind of genre, and it's like I was kind of scrambling for ideas of what that could like summed up to without sounding like
it is really its own kind of subgenre of comedy, and so it's inspired so many things, and I think definitely that's an easy one to go to. But what do you got for your next piece?
So my next piece would be Frank Henenlotter's Brain Damage, and I think like this one really, really feels like it's like I would love to know if it was like an influence on the film, and like to go back to that specifically that club scene. There is a scene in Brain Damage which, if people haven't seen Brain Damage, is basically about a parasitic alien who kind of peeks out of this like this guy's head or like kind of detaches from him, called Elmer, who needs to feast on brains to survive. So very much like Venom as well. And there is this weird scene of, I guess it's like, it's a really graphic scene of this guy going to like an alternative club and ends up like getting head from a woman, and like this thing like bursts out of his trousers and like rips this woman's brain out, stuff like that. But it was like in those moments, and obviously, yeah, that whole idea of this parasitic alien that is comical and sweet, but at the same time, it's like, can it be trusted? It's
Right.
like grotesque. Like in Brain Damage, there's a whole moment where the Elmer breaks into like a show tune when like the main character is like his lowest ebb, and it kind of like reminds me of like scenes in this when you get those confrontations between like Eddie and Venom when it's like, you're nothing without me, and like and that's kind of like what Elmer says is like, you kind of, I'm like a drug, like you need me to survive. So yeah, I think Brain Damage, I wouldn't even be surprised if like the creator of the Venom comic, like I'm not sure if it lines up to kind of, it's a 90s like.
Right. I wonder, timeline-wise, that might actually work out. I'm not sure when the Venom comic originated, but I need to watch that movie. I'm sure I saw it back in high school, but it's been like forever, and it just sounds so great, and I need to revisit that one of these days.
Well, yeah, it seems like it's the year of like Frank Henenlotter appreciation in modern movies, whether it's like you've kind of got the intentional or unintentional homage to Brain Damage in this, and then the kind of parasitic twin like going crazy basket case that's kind of like a lot of people are jumping on and saying like malignant, like Malignant's taken that from that, and like it's like it's a great time to be a Frank Henenlotter fan if you're into your like, scrungy low budget New York schlock horror movies.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of schlocky horror movies, I'm going to go with Little Shop of Horrors, which kind of goes right along with Brain Damage. Venom is this thing that Eddie has to feed and keep him happy and keep him satiated. And if not, he's going to end up eating people and causing all kinds of havoc. And their relationship kind of hinges on Eddie, keeping him happy, and it's very kind of similar to Little Shop of Horrors with Audrey and trying to keep that giant killer plant happy. And it's this movie, I could see if they were to continue with a third Venom, I could see musical sequences. That would be like kind of the next logical step to take from that club scene you talked about. It's just, this movie is just total camp the whole way through, and I think takes a lot of cues from that.
Yeah, I think it does very much lean into the camp of it all, doesn't it? It kind of like is like, this is, well, it feels like they all know what they're doing, and it's kind of like a master stroke to go, what is the biggest issue of this film for a lot of people? It'd be like CGI. So it's like, how do we combat that issue? It's like, let's get a man who kind of like, at this point is like the master of motion capture and like CGI and Andy Serkis to direct it. It's like, let's litter the cast with like heavy hitters, do you know what I mean? Like whether it's like Tom Hardy's own friends, like in Stephen Graham, and then like you got like Naomie Harris as Shriek and Woody Harrelson as Cletus Cassidy, and it's like, on paper you kind of look at that cast list and go like, wow, like that's great. And it's like they have back to that point of like, they've just listened to the fans and gone, you liked it being camp, well, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to camp it up. We're just going to have fun for 90 minutes and throw you around the cinema and then let you out into the world and tell people whether you loved it or hated it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think, I still haven't decided whether I like this one better than the first one or not, but I do think Andy Serkis he's so great, like in everything he does. And I think he's still a little green when it comes to being a director, but I really want to see him do more stuff. And I think this is a great, if not great, at least interesting stepping stone towards where he's going to end up, because everything he does, he seems to excel at eventually.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it is the case, but like this film very much feels like it is like, like when you hear those stories of, like George P. Cosmatos, where it's like, oh, he was the director of Cobra, but then you hear these like stories years on where it's like, oh no, it's actually Stallone directed that film, but for like insurance reasons or whatever, like he couldn't star in it and direct it. And it like, with Tom Hardy's fingerprints being so all over this, it feels like down to casting decisions, down to like, he's even like
he co-wrote it too.
Like story by like the writer is his best friend Kelly Marcel, and it's like it even down to there is Siegfried, the kind of the he's like another mental patient at Raven Court, is a UK like hip hop artist and spoken word artist Scroobius Pip, who was in Taboo, the like I think it was like
that
a BBC
series he was in.
alongside Stephen Graham. So it's almost it's like it will come to one of my puzzle pieces, but it all feels like this beautiful incestuous mess with kind of Tom Hardy at the helm of it, and it could feel almost like Tom Hardy's the puppet master somewhat, to being like,
sure,
we want it a bit like this. I can't even do a Tom Hardy voice because I don't even think he knows what his natural accent is anymore.
Nobody does. Yeah, no one has any clue. But what do you got for your next piece?
Well, I should throw it out. I did lead myself with a good segue there. And this again is a weird tangential one, but it's any film made by Adam Sandler's production company, Happy Madison, because
I knew that's where you were going to go when you were just saying that last stuff there about the friends all kind of getting together. I was like, I bet he's going to Adam Sandler.
Because like that, it's a kind of like it feels like an excuse to be like, what? I'm going to make a film. It's going to be fun. Let's all just like pack up my friends and have a barbecue at like a holiday resort and make grown-ups, for instance. Do you know what I mean? It very much feels like that vibe, but unlike a lot of the kind of Adam Sandler fare, this feels like it's done with the best intentions instead of, I don't know, like giving some people who like don't really deserve a platform to be in movies a platform. Do you know what I mean? Like people like Alan Cover or Rob Schneider to some degree. Like this feels like Tom Hardy going, I'm best friends with Stephen Graham, arguably like one of the best like character actors out there.
He's so
like,
good.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like he'll show up in, he's like constantly on British TV in like drama miniseries and then like he just pops up in The Irishman. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of stealing the show, going toe to toe with like Al Pacino. There's like a great like anecdote. I think that scene when he smashes the ice cream off the table when he has that like confrontation with Al Pacino in that film, like on the first take, Al Pacino went, whoa, this kid's got it. Like, this is where we're going with it. So like, he's really shown himself to be this like powerhouse of modern acting. And then it's like, for Tom Hardy to just be like, I've got him at my disposal, just feels like it takes the film into like this weird otherworldly thing. And it's, I don't know. Yeah, obviously hosting a Coppola podcast, it's like, I love nepotism done well. And,
sure.
That's what this film feels like it does.
By the way, Al Pacino, part of that Adam Sandler universe.
Of course, the Dunkachino himself. Yeah.
Well, that's a great piece there. I'm going to go to another piece here. This is a super, super, super obvious one, but I think it fits and is worth bringing up. And that's just little bits and pieces of all of the different Spider-Man properties, the different continuums within it. The Sam Raimi Spider-Mans for the kind of very comic booky feel and very over the topness of them. The Amazing Spider-Mans, as bad as they are, for the CGI fights and all that stuff. And then the most recent Tom Holland ones as part of the MCU, especially now that this is again, spoiler alert, but with the post-credit scene, we know that this is finally going to kind of somehow or other link up with the MCU. So you get little bits and pieces of everything that's kind of made the different Spider-Men over the years is kind of mashed together in here, I think.
That's great. And I'm on the topic of that post-credit scene, I've really been racking my brain as to what it is telling us as an audience like is going to happen next. And it's like, because obviously like we have that moment where the room changes and like all of a sudden the TV is the end point of was it Far From Home, when it's revealed by Joe Jonah Jameson that Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
Right.
And then, like, my brain went, oh, is that the moment when Doctor Strange, because, like, from the trailer of No Way Home, is that the nexus point when he kind of, like, opens the portal to all of the other dimensions, but obviously he's making them forget, like, who Peter Parker is and stuff like that. So it's like, I don't know, is it going to be a Sony property? Is it going to be an MCU property? Like, it's kind of, like, baffling at this moment. Like, because at one point I was like, is he going to turn up in No Way Home? Like, is that where this is going? It's like, because that would be fucking crazy, considering, like, that film's only out in 2 months.
Right. Yeah, it would be crazy. And you got to imagine that there are lawyers and whatever it is behind the scenes just working overtime to, like, figure out a way to make this happen. Because, this movie, I don't think it should have been as big of a hit as it is. And it's done really good business. And obviously we're still actually in the pandemic. I mean, it's not like it's over, and box office has not returned to normal, but this movie did huge numbers, and the Marvel movies keep doing huge numbers. And, if we want to see, Hollywood and big budget movies continue through all this, these are the ways that it's going to be led forward. I mean, I'm certainly more interested in, the indie films and stuff like that than anything, but I also care about movie theaters, and I care about keeping the whole business going and everything. And this is what's going to keep the business going if they could find a way to continue these things.
Yeah, it's weird because one of the things I saw today was the trailer for Morbius. Like, it was like, it's a real, like, Spider-Man, like, Sony centric trailers, because it was Morbius, No Way Home. Like, they were, like, kind of the two big trailers beforehand. I was like, that trailer even has allusions to Spider-Man, because, like, there's a bit in that trailer where it says, like, there's a picture of Spider-Man on the wall and it says, like, murderer over the top, and it's like, is that involved as well? And it's like, it's a real muddled mess of where this is all going, because it's like, we've, like, you're saying about, like, the lawyers and that, it's like, so is that then gonna tie in somewhere to, or is there gonna be like a splinter thing where Sony are like, oh, we're gonna do some of our films with Tom Holland that isn't a part of the MCU? And it's like, it's exciting at the same time, because it's like, it could just be like, it could actually be like comics themselves, where it's like, these this artist and writer are doing their run over here. This, do you know what I mean? This writer and this artist are doing their work over there. Pick and choose which kind of issues you want to pick up and put down and stuff like that. And it's a fascinating.
Sounds like a multiverse prospect to me.
Exactly. Yeah. a multiverse of madness. That's what it definitely is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to get so complicated and crazy, but I'm sure comic book fans will love that. So what do you got for your next piece?
So my next piece is a kind of, I think, a forgotten 90s Denzel Washington movie called Fallen, which, if you remember the plot of that, like, Denzel Washington at the beginning goes to meet a murderer who's on death row. So very, like, mirrors this very heavily. And once this murderer is killed, his kind of MO continues. And then throughout the machinations of the plot and kind of some digging, we find out that it's not a person who's committing these murders. It is a kind of evil spirit that passes from person to person. So very much like those scenes we get in this of, like, the Venom escaping from people and then, like, jumping onto the next. And what was always creepy about Fallen for me is, like, you see these sequences where people are bumping into each other, and it gets to that point that you don't know who is the evil entity and stuff like that. And I just, like, it jumped out to me from like kind of moment one. I was like, are they drawing upon Fallen here? Because, like, I was like, it's a film I, like, weirdly rewatched last year, because I was like, I remember really loving that film, and I think there are like moments in it where you kind of like it's talking and taunting. It's the way like Carnage kind of like taunts or even like Venom taunts Eddie and stuff like that. It feels almost like of a piece, and I think they would make a weird double bill together.
Sure. Yeah. No, I like bringing that up as a piece. I hadn't thought of that, but I don't remember what the reasoning was, but just recently I was talking with somebody about how they don't really make movies like Fallen anymore, like the supernatural thriller, like where it's still like a cop thriller kind of thing, but there's, either religious or, some kind of other supernatural stuff thrown in there. And that it's kind of a fun little subgenre that I'd love to see stuff like that happen again.
Yeah, I think it falls down to that, like the death of the mid-budget movie and like movies
Sure.
for adults, essentially, right? Like, because like it falls in that category of like post-Seven movies as well. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
how about Seven, but with an evil entity? And it's like, you can imagine the elevator pitch for that, and it's like, who you got starring in it? We got Denzel and we got John Goodman in it. It's like, here's your like $50 million check, like back in those days when they like would take risks on movies like that like are kind of few and far between in this day and age.
Sure. Well, I'll go into another piece here, and this is like my last like good piece. I have a few other possible ideas I might bring up, but I wanted to bring up 1994's Natural Born Killers from Oliver Stone, which of course also has Woody Harrelson as a serial killer, and with his crazy wife, who's also nuts, as they connect and go on their crime spree. And, of course, that Woody Harrelson is back here squarely in that kind of a setup, as his character is Carnage with his wife that he needs to break out of prison. Shriek, is that the name? I didn't even write it down. But yeah, Naomie Harris. But Woody Harrelson's such a fun actor to watch. He in so many things. I mean, he kind of, speaking of Nick Cage and people like that, he kind of like doesn't always, connect every time he comes out for a role because he does so much. But he can be so much fun to watch, though, when he picks the right projects. And he's strangely, I don't know if he works 100% in this movie, but he's still fun to watch regardless.
Well, I think what's interesting about Woody Harrelson in this movie is like he's having so much fun, and it's like once you get past the wig, like because that is like that is kind of like a glaring thing in this film. It's like, oh, Woody's in a wig, and it's like it's not a good. It's like sitting on top of his head, like as opposed to like being a part of his head. And like his character, I don't like. That's the thing. Like it's kind of great that like the film doesn't go too much into like who he was before this. It's kind of just like, here he is. He's a serial killer. We're just gonna go on with the plot. At some point, he's gonna be infested with like carnage, and you get like some really interesting scenes. Whether it's like the moment when Eddie Brock's reading that postcard from him, and you get that weird like, animation that comes up on screen where he's like telling his story of like who he was as a kid and how he murdered his grandma and his mum and his dad and stuff like that, and like went to this I don't know, like correctional facility for kids like St. Estes and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, like he looked like I don't know, there's something charming about Woody Harrelson, and obviously like you can tell he was probably thinking like, for him, it's like he's revisiting that character from Natural Born Killers in some way. Like he gets to kind of flex that muscle once again, and it's I do see your point in it's like I don't know if he works. One of the things I wasn't sure about as well is it starts off in 1996, and like Cletus Cassidy is supposed to be like a teenager, and it's like I was just trying to figure out like do the I don't think the ages match up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Woody was what, like however many seasons, or like oh no, Cheers was done by like 96. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So like it's like I'm not, and they like overdub the teenage actor with
It had Woody Harrelson's voice on him, right?
Yeah. And it's like no teenager sounds like that. No teenager sounds like as that like disheveled and kind of like world weary as Woody Harrelson does.
Oh, I forgot all about that until just now. That is so funny. Yeah, what a choice that is. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh man. Well, do you have any more pieces?
Yeah, I've got a few. I guess the next one that's a kind of big one would be like Hellraiser, in the fact that Cletus Cassidy very much is this character who is like, he seems like he is all about pleasure and just all he wants is to reconnect with like the love of his life, which very much like mirrors that relationship between Frank and I forget the character's name or the actress's name from Hellraiser, but that kind of thing of like all that matters to them is kind of like getting together and like the kind of sexual like chemistry and stuff like that, because you get that moment when he reveals himself as Carnage to Shriek and she's like, that's so hot, and it is that kind of, and it's that weird like gloopy sinew, because you get those scenes in Hellraiser when Frank is like this gooey like fleshless man and stuff like that, and like you get like they kiss and stuff like that, and it's this like grossness to it. And I think like the kind of it reminds me of Hellraiser and the griminess of the kind of characters and the kind of like, I don't know, like sludgy, like they feel like they'd be horrible to touch, especially like Carnage. Like it's like you just feel like you just need to like wash yourself, have a shower immediately after touching him. And it's like, yeah, anytime, I don't know, anytime to talk about Clive Barker and how great Hellraiser is as well. So if anything kind of borrows from that, I'm kind of on board.
Yeah, Hellraiser is another series that, I'm sure I watched at least one or two of them back in high school, maybe all of them, but I haven't seen them since then, and I need to revisit that series.
Yeah, for me, it is very much, it's a trilogy, and like at a push, and like the first one is arguably like it's because it's weird. It's like this film, like people might have this perception of it, and like Hellraiser, people have this perception of it of being like this thing of like, they obviously see like Pinhead as the kind of main villain of it, and it's like he hardly gets any screen time really in it, and it's more about it's this weird like gothic body horror romance, and like the real villain of it is the kind of like female character who's going out doing Frank's bidding and bringing back these kind of desperate men who she lures in with like sex, and then like brings them up to this attic and murders them, so like Frank can like consume their essence to kind of build up another layer of his body. And it's like that is the film it is. And it's like, yeah, this film very much looks like bang bang CGI, like Marvel fare and stuff like that, but like at the heart of it, it is a kind of, like we said earlier on, it's character piece about the relationship between a failing journalist and his symbiotic kind of alien buddy.
Yeah, it would be weird to see the dark and gritty version of the Venom story versus the over the top silly inspired by Raimi, version of it, which is what we got.
Yeah, because I know that like in the US it's a PG-13, right? Like rating.
Yeah.
And so like here in the UK it's a 15. So I guess that would be like an R in the US essentially. Like I think our rating systems work out a bit differently, but like it's kind of like caused some, like, I don't know, some people like being a bit weird about the fact that it is a 15 rated film, because it's like another superhero movie from this year that has the same rating as The Suicide Squad, which is a movie that kind of like very much warrants an R rating, and to kind of like
Sure.
club those films together feels. I don't know where I sit on it as well, because like I kind of see the point of like this could have been like a lower rating, like very much a PG-13 movie, but it also does like, I don't know, it alludes to a lot darker things that, do you know what I mean?
Definitely. No, definitely. There's a couple of moments I had written down where I was like, I really think they wanted to go closer to R with, like, I mean, first of all, when he's smacking around his wife, I mean, that's, pretty heavy stuff, once he starts getting like really, taken over by Carnage and starts getting abusive. And then there's the one scene that was, clearly meant to be more funny and more, I think, brutal and violent when he says power up and then eats the priest, but it kind of like cuts away and it doesn't show it, but that's like such a Venom Carnage kind of like violent scene that you're really kind of just surprised that they didn't go there with it. And I think they just had to pull back and stick to that PG-13 or 15 out there.
Yeah, I think from listening to an interview of Andy Serkis, like, it was a film that got presented to the MPAA a couple of times. Like, they very much like in that very much like tick box exercise of how can we make the most amount of money. Just like and you can almost like, if you kind of look at it again through that lens of like, you can go, they've trimmed that, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think the first time it went, they would have went, that's an R.
Right.
But with suggestions, they went, if you trim this down, if you kind of like, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, put like kind of digital blurring on this bit or whatever, or don't hang on that as long, you can trim it down to a PG-13.
Yeah.
So I think it's very much is one of those kind of ones that straddles the boundaries of rating as to like,
sure.
Yeah, it like it's the type of thing that would have, I don't know, back in the day, like created a new, do you know what I mean? Like how was it? Raiders of the Lost Ark basically invented the PG-13 or something like that.
Sure,
it kind of would have been those ones. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll get a Serkis cut one of these days. See what happens. But,
3 hours.
Yeah, I'll go with a final piece here on my end, and this is a very like simple, like one note piece, but that's Silence of the Lambs for all the scenes of Eddie interviewing Cletus. Mm-hmm. And behind the glass wall, and he's presented as this complete psychopath, but who's got answers and who can help with the cases outside of the prison. And so, just a little bit of that Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal Lecter thing going on with Woody's character.
I can definitely see that, and that's one, like, so I wrote down, and I just kind of like skimmed. I wrote down Mindhunter, or the new Amber Seeley film No Man of God, like that kind of thing of. I think in the way it relates to like No Man of God is that thing of, it's all about Bill Hagmaier, the investigate, like the FBI agent who like interviewed Ted Bundy, like in kind of like in his kind of got the confessions out of him by the end of like what actually happened and stuff like that. But the film very much deals with that thing of like, how long can you stare into the abyss of a killer before, and like question that thing, like, could you kill somebody? Do you know what I mean? And I think this film kind of like deals with, because in essence, like, Venom is very much an anti-hero, and like Venom wants to kill people all the time.
Yeah, he wants to eat everyone.
Yeah. And it plays around with that idea like quite well, and I think like it's I don't know, it's it does a fun thing with it and makes that kind of that big topic digestible to a wider audience. And I guess if they want to delve deeper into it, they can go on Netflix and watch Mindhunter or something, where it is that thing of like interviewing serial killers and what makes a serial killer a serial killer.
Well, that's huge right now with all the true crime stuff and everything like that. But No Man of God is something that I have not gotten a chance to watch yet this year, but I want to watch that. That sounds really good from everything I've heard about it. But right on. Do you have any other pieces you wanted to bring up before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'll just throw out a couple of silly ones. A really obvious one is Don Quixote which is like referenced in the film, and the idea that like they're chasing like the idea of like chasing windmills and looking for that idea of what is it he says, like Don Quixote and Sancho Pancho like don't see eye to eye, but they kind of are going for the same goal at the end of the day, which is very much reminiscent of Eddie and
Sure,
but kind of delivered in this film like like a first year college student going like, I've read Don Quixote.
Sure, yeah.
Let's make this film have a bit of like gravitas at the end. And another one would be Sesame Street with the Cookie Monster, and that's all down to Tom Hardy's performance as Venom whenever he's like, oh, you say tomato, I say tomato. Like, it just feels like this kind of Cookie Monster voice he's doing all the time, which I love. And my final one, and I feel like I have to mention a Nicolas Cage film, and it would be Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, just for a sequel where it's like handed to someone to just go like, go fucking nuts with it, make the film you kind of want to make. And that very much feels like what Neville Dean and Taylor did with that film, where it's like, we can slightly dismiss like the event. You can see the first one, you don't really have to see the first one, but we're just going to give like, we're going to try our best to give the fans what they want. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, if that's Ghost Rider pissing fire in Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, that's that. If it's Venom like fully out in a kind of nightclub having his like speech about acceptance and coming out to the world, then you're gonna have it. If it's kind of more squabbling and stuff like that, yeah, we're gonna give the fans what at least they think they want.
Man, speaking of giving the fans what they want, could you imagine in the moment right now that Nicolas Cage is having, you know, he's definitely like such a huge thing in the pop culture, if he showed up as Ghost Rider in like the Spider-Man multiverse or something like that? I think it would just, I think people would just lose their fucking minds.
Yeah, well, I saw recently that James Mangold talked about, like he tweeted about how much he loved Pig. And all that's been rattling around my brain is like the Logan treatment on Ghost Rider, like an aging Cage kind of like,
give me it,
like really trying to like, do you know what I mean? Like really in turmoil, like this kind of character study of what it really means to be the Ghost Rider, and like being like almost like an instrument of evil and Beelzebub and like Lucifer and like all these kind of Mephisto, like bringing in that whole like thing that Marvel are too scared to touch at the moment and stuff like that. And like, but yeah, given the real James Mangold treatment, what he did with Logan would be it kind of like it's one of those things that's never going to happen. And I think like I know Ghost Rider popped up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something like that, but like...
Oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, so like, obviously, sans Cage, so, but like, yeah, Cage... It's great to know that he is involved somewhat tangentially in like the Marvel comic cinematic universe to some degree as like Spider-Man Noir. But like, he could play a live action Spider-Man Noir if he turned up in No Way Home as like a multiversal Spider-Man Noir. People just go, that fits. Like,
yeah, we need it. Like, give it to us. Just give us that, please. Like,
yeah, because I've said it so many. I've said it on my podcast. I've kind of like said it on other podcasts when I've been invited to talk about Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. Is like, that is the definition of somebody who like they know what the assignment is and they do it. It's like, I'm gonna be a noir. I'm gonna Humphrey Bogart it up to the eyeballs, and like I think there's clips of Cage online when the directors were like, oh, we want a bit more, and they couldn't quite get the words, and he's like, you want a bit more Cage? I got you. And then kind of like really gives them the full Nicolas Cage, and it's like for him to, I don't know, yeah. You're teasing me here. You're teasing me here, David. You're dangling a carrot that I know I'm never going to get to nibble on.
Oh man, well I'm going to go ahead and do the finished puzzle here, and then we'll get into some closing thoughts on Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Our finished puzzle includes Marriage Story, The Odd Couple, Brain Damage, Little Shop of Horrors, every Adam Sandler movie, all the different Spider-Man series, Fallen, Natural Born Killers, Hellraiser, Silence of the Lambs, Mindhunter, No Man of God, Don Quixote, Sesame Street, and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. What an all over the place list of puzzle pieces we got with this one, but that's the only way this was ever gonna happen. I mean, this movie is just so all over the place, but it was definitely a lot of fun to talk about. Are there any things we didn't quite get to that you wanted to bring up?
Not really. It like you can talk about the plot, but I don't really think you need to. Like
Right.
it's plot light to some degree, and it makes it quite fun. It is the definition of leave your brain in the bucket.
No,
Kind of just experience it, have fun, and just be like, feel grateful that you're watching a 90-minute like comic book movie where it's like we said before, you don't have to have seen loads of other stuff, and like, spoiler alert, but like at the end of it, Carnage is dead. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they kind of like really give the fans what they want of like that scene where he's like, fuck this guy, and like just bites off Cletus Cassidy's head, and it's like, oh, that's so refreshing. There's no like, the tease to where it's going to go next is actually exciting, as opposed to like, there's gonna like, yeah, it's not got like a second post credits where like, it's gonna go here within the Venom universe, and very much feels like they're flying by the seat of their pants as to where the franchise will go anyway, with like, I don't know, where does Tom Hardy want it to go? And that's what I love about it. It feels like a passion project, and like, if this is what Tom Hardy wants to like have in his back pocket whenever like he kind of feels the need to return to Eddie Brock, because it feels like he's got a lot of love for the character and Venom, like, so yeah, if he returns to these films every few years, like, I'd love to see a Eddie Venom like road trip movie or something like that. Like, those two kind of like,
that seems like a good place for it to go. Actually.
Yeah, like they've got like Trains, Planes, and Automobiles with Eddie Brock and Venom. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I want to see. Really go down all those kind of odd couple comedy staples and kind of like pick them off one by one and really give. Really see how much juice you can drain from this. From Tom Hardy acting against himself.
Yeah, until Tom Hardy's bored, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
He's earned the right to do this, I guess. I think we covered it. Do we want to talk about the Eminem song at all? I know that you were kind of fixated on that a little bit.
Yeah, like I got so lost in the milieu of how crazy this film is, and kind of like experience it. I think it's because in the film, it's not. It feels like they've just wheeled it out for the soundtrack and not the film itself. Like, which
it doesn't have anything to do with the movie, like even a little bit.
No, and like the lyrics to the film, like the first verse, I believe, is like him talking about his addiction to like pain medication and sleeping pills, and it's like I don't think you got the assignment on this, and then he's like egregiously just like on this chorus for the song manages to rhyme words that have no right being rhymed together, and I'll kind of I'll recite a couple of them because they just like read out. Well, I'll read them out in kind of boring.
This is like a professor version, reading it in class. Yeah.
So it says, Venom, I got that adrenaline momentum. I can't help but almost like sing it, but like I'm not knowing when I'm. Yeah. So he uses "I'm" to rhyme with momentum, but like does it in this way where he just like almost half hums it. So it's Venom, I got adrenaline momentum, and it like it reminds me of the time that Eminem made that ridiculous claim where he's like, I could like oranges or like orange, you can't rhyme anything with oranges, I'm gonna do it, and then he just manipulates the word oranges So he says oranges, like, and then rhymes it with syringes. And it's like, you haven't rhymed the word oranges. You have changed the pronunciation of the word oranges to fit your agenda here.
For the record, I used to have a comedy rap thing I did back in college, and back in 2002, 2003, I rhymed orange with door hinge. So I take credit for that. So.
Yeah. Oh, I think that is in there as well.
Yeah, he copied me.
Yeah,
I'm going
he says
on record. I got beef.
Off the door hinges, oranges, but then like he like, do you know what I mean? Syringes, it doesn't work. And what he does with the chorus on this song is, again, he's just manipulating the pronunciation of words, and I guess that is what like hip hop music is, but it just feels so egregious in this chorus. But it's like Venom itself, because it just like, it was just in me. It was in me like this virus, and I couldn't get away from it. And I kind of like felt this head coming out of me, like Eminem there, going like, listen to it. And I tweeted out recently, because it's so hum heavy as well. It's like, they really missed the trick of not getting like Kid Cudi on the chorus, who is like the modern king of humming. He's kind of got this career, whether it's like on Kids See Ghosts with Kanye West, he's got this whole thing of like, one of the beats is just him going just like he's just mastered this like soulful, beautiful hum. And it's like, you've missed the trick of, if you're gonna like be so hum heavy, get the king in, get Kid Cudi. And I hope if there is a Venom 3 and they rehash, and yeah, what another thing is, this is a remix of a song that was for the first movie. So it's lazy that they've just changed the beat up and gone, here you go, here is the here is a changed beat, just so you can like wheel it out for this.
Tom Hardy called him and was like, I need a new song, and he was like, how about this? I got this for you. That'll have to do for now.
And I guess the only like reference to kind of like Marvel or the film itself is these lines, which I guess is, they're quite, again, like he's throwing out words that like in 2019 and 2020, like even when Venom 1 came out, he shouldn't have been saying, but like yeah, just this phrase, he says, I latch onto you like a parasite, and I'm probably going to ruin your parents' lives and your childhood too. Because if I'm the music you grew up on, I'm responsible for you retarded fools. So I'm the supervillain mum and dad were losing their marbles to. You marvel that Eddie Brock is you, and I'm the suit, so call me Venom. I got the adrenaline momentum. Yeah.
I think by reciting those lyrics, we just close the chapter on Venom. Let There Be Carnage.
We really let there be carnage. I've come on here fully red symbiotic madness and really just bit the head off of this motherfucker.
There you go. Well, I always ask my guests at the end of the episode, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yes, I recently watched, off the back of seeing Sion Sono's work with Nicolas Cage in Prisoners of the Ghostland, I looked back into the work of Sion Sono and checked out his 2013 film, Why Don't You Play in Hell, which feels like this weird mix of like an American movie / like Kevin Smith movies, Tarantino, but only in the way that a Japanese director who kind of really just blurs the line between genre. It's about these kids who are trying to make a movie whilst being about these two rival factioning like Yakuza gangs and this bi-generational conflict and stuff like that, and just spirals into utter carnage. And one of the things, like, yeah, a film like Prisoners of the Ghostland, I don't think entirely works.
Mm.
and I've got some spicy takes on that film, and definitely something you'd be interested in, some puzzle pieces that if you ever cover that film, I look forward to hearing what puzzle pieces come up about that one. But one of the things it's really made me do is check out the work of prolific Japanese like artist, author, director Sion Sono, who has just got this staggeringly diverse and wonderful career, whether it's, like I said, Why Don't You Play in Hell, Anti-Porno, or his kind of magnum opus, The 4-Hour Love Exposure. Like, all of those are just like, it's that thing, like, I think is wonderful about foreign cinema is like, you feel like it's the same with like old movies. You feel like you're kind of like, oh, I've seen everything, but like when you find out about like this director far afield, it's like, not only am I introduced to like a film I've never seen before, it's like I've been introduced to like a style of filmmaking I've almost never seen before. And like,
Right.
so yeah, I think kind of find an entry point into Sion Sono and definitely check out his work. And I think it's beautiful that like with Prison of the Ghostland potentially not working, that it could be an amazing gateway for people in like the Western world to check out a director. I guess in the same way that Face Off would have been like people's entry point to like John Woo. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
So you got to commend. I always say you got to commend Cage for kind of working with these directors and kind of shining a spotlight. And whether it's not their best film, like it's gonna definitely open the door to more eyes on movies by that director. And so the films of Sion Sono, but I've listed 3 there, so I'd definitely say check him out if you haven't.
Awesome. Great recommendation there. So yeah, that does it. Why don't you tell people again where they can find you and your podcast?
So you can find me on all social medias. So that is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Letterboxd, all at Caged In Pod, where I watch every film that has any involvement from a Coppola family member, as tangential as they may be. And any time there is a new Nicolas Cage film out, that takes precedent. And I dive back in and I don't know, get abused by my first love, and see whether it's going to be roses or it's going to be another argument in a restaurant. So come on over, join the fun. I've had some great guests, some weird and wonderful people, some people you might not know have connections to the Coppola family and stuff like that. But yeah, join the party. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me here on this show, and hopefully we'll be able to do it again sometime, man.
Thank you so much, man. I've loved listening to your podcast, and as I said to you off mic before we started, there's an element of crowd participation in listening to your podcast, because you come up with all your own puzzle pieces that you may have missed, but I think it gives the podcast a second lease of life, that you can then have these discussions online and stuff like that. And I'm glad I could be a part of this weird and wonderful concept.
Comic book stores, sports card shops, the exciting atmospheres of being a geek kid in the 90s. I'm Micah, a 36-year-old girl dad, hubby, and geek. And on the Tavern Geek podcast, my friends and I ramble on about geek culture and NBA basketball while enjoying crafted adult beverages. So, kick back and enjoy us, the Tavern Geeks.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Glad to be able to get a chance to talk about that one and not let it slide by, because as far as, we usually cover all the big Marvel movies, but this being its own little side thing, it's kind of a little bit of a different thing to try to cover. So I'm glad we got to have this conversation. Make sure to check out Caged In, and thank you to Petros for joining me here. As always, I want to remind you to make sure you're subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts. You can, of course, follow us over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, Good Pods, any of the podcast apps. We should be there. You can, of course, rate and review us on all of those as well. 5 stars would be nice, but, let us know what you're thinking about the show. If there's any puzzle pieces you think we missed, or you want to say, hey, that was a good puzzle piece on that one, get in touch with me, at PiecingPod on all the social medias. I'm trying to be more active on Instagram lately, but also, Twitter's kind of my home base. And, of course, the Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces Facebook group. That's where you can always find me. But, yeah, get in touch. Let us know what you think of the show and any puzzle pieces we might have missed or that you thought were really good ones. I love hearing from people that listen. So definitely get in touch. And, the Patreon, produced by David Rosen. Check it out. It's patreon.com/bydavidrosen. Lots of great content over there. And hopefully by the time this goes up, I'll have readied some bonus tracks from the Dissection Table, my most recent album. It's on the to-do list. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to get those ready soon. And maybe they'll be up by the time this goes up. I don't know. But they are coming to that Produced by David Rosen Patreon, so check that out. And speaking of my music, let's close this thing out with a piece of my music. And I'm going to go with a classic, so to speak. I mean, it's weird to call my own music a classic, but classic as far as the world of my music is concerned. This is Back Into the Dark. I'm sure I've played it a bunch of times on the podcast over the last 5 years. It's one of my favorite tracks that I've put out. There's a really cool stop-motion animated music video for it made by a visual artist named B. Landers. It's like really dark and creepy and messed up and weird, and that's what made me think of it with Let There Be Carnage, because it kind of looks a little bit like the Venom creature. But yeah, let's play this track. It's from my third album, Head Like Fire. It's called Back Into the Dark. Hope you enjoy it. We'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.